We want to head now to Michigan Democratic Senator Gary Peters. Senator Peters, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Oh, great to be with you.
I want to start with President Trump's announcement yesterday that he's pausing some of those tariffs, so the levels dropped to about 10%. We did see that rally on Wall Street and then another dip today. Do you think President Trump did the right thing by pressing the pause button yesterday?
Well, certainly it was the right thing to push the pause button, but it didn't fix the situation in any way. The amount of chaos that is out there right now is continuing to have a very negative impact on the economy. You know, it's interesting. I was with a leading company, their CEO, in my office yesterday. We had the announcement. We saw the short-term rally in the market. And basically, he said, he goes, you know, I'm a little bit happy that this news came out today, but just a little bit, because we still now have to wait 90 days to figure out exactly what's going to happen. He said, basically, I have to freeze any kind of investing that I'm doing right now because of the uncertainty. I can't invest. I can't start creating new jobs in order to do that. I can't do the things that I need to grow my business. I'm frozen. He goes, we've got to have some clarity here. So certainly it was a step that prevented a lot more chaos. But let's not forget the fact there's still way too much chaos in the economy. And the one thing businesses hate more than anything is chaos. They cannot make the business plans they need to grow their business, create jobs, and help the economy.
Well, given the ongoing uncertainty, given the fact that there are 145% tariffs against China, it seems like there is a trade war brewing between these two countries. Do you think that the United States is headed for a recession?
Certainly the odds continue to grow. I know in the segment you had before me, the economists still believe that it's very real. But I think the thing that concerns me the most is we've actually heard President Trump say, yeah, you know, there could be a recession. And he basically said it was okay. And I've challenged people. Have you ever heard a United States president say it's okay if we go into a recession? I've never heard that my entire life. And I think if we go through the history books, we would never hear a United States president say that's okay. This is going to hurt people in a meaningful way going forward. The one thing we know is costs are going to rise. People are going to see those increases. We still have the tariffs on Canada, which is a leading trading partner for the country. And in Michigan, we're the #1 state when it comes to trading with Canada. It's going to have a significant impact. And although right now some of it is on hold, if it's part of the Canada-Mexico trade agreement, there's still a lot of products that aren't part of that. In fact, we're waiting right now as to whether or not auto parts are going to be exempt. And you know what would have the biggest impact on prices for American-made cars will be if auto parts, which should be compliant with the trade agreement, but if it's ruled the other way, you're going to see car prices going up by thousands of dollars. We already know the Canadian tariffs that are in place now are in lumber. That means building costs. At a time when we do not have enough housing for Americans already, to now have this tariff on Canadian lumber and have the price of new homes go up, some estimates by $20,000, will just put housing out of the price range of most Americans. It's simply unacceptable to do this, and the president needs to roll back a whole lot more.
Well, speaking of the trade deal, you did support the USMCA, which was negotiated by President Trump. Given that he says that there are, you know, all these countries who want to make a trade deal, do you think that he can make some good deals? And if he does, will this have been worth it, Senator?
Well, certainly we have to make. I believe that we should look at the Mexican-Canada trade deal. I thought that when I supported it, but you know, certainly it is not perfect by any means. There's a lot more that we need to do, particularly the ability for other countries like China, that can kind of sneak in and able to work its way through that trade agreement. We got to make sure all those loopholes are closed. It's up for renegotiation. That's part of the plan. And it must be renegotiated to make it even stronger to prevent folks from engaging in activities that circumvent the meaning of that trade agreement. So, you know, I support that. I look forward to that. But certainly we're paying a very big price right now, and the American people are going to be paying a very big price. And part of the instability that you're seeing in global markets as well is doing a lot of damage for our trading partners and our friends and our allies. And I believe the longer this goes on, it's harder to unwind that damage. And we're going to end up paying the price of this for a long, long time.
Let me ask you about something that some of your Democratic colleagues are saying. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer calling for an investigation into the timing of the announcement of the pause, saying that he's concerned that there was insider trading. A number of other Democrats saying the same. Do you agree with that? Do you want to see an investigation into the possibility of insider trading?
Oh, I definitely think there needs to be an investigation. When the market can move as much as it has done, based on a few words of one individual, the ability for corruption and for crimes to be committed is immense. It should be investigated. There may be people, particularly some of President Trump's billionaire friends, who have made an awful lot of money in these last few days, and we need to investigate that. We need to have faith that the security markets are truly fair, and inside information is insidious, and if the president has been engaged in that, that needs to certainly be brought to light, and if a crime was committed, prosecuted.
And your state's Governor Gretchen Whitmer, as you know, shifting gears a little bit, was here in Washington, D.C. She gave a speech on tariffs. She met with President Trump yesterday. She was brought, her staff says, surprisingly into the Oval Office. She says that she wasn't expecting or didn't know what the content would be of what the president was signing. He did wind up signing some executive orders. He said she'd done an excellent job. What do you make of that and the optics of her being in the Oval Office, which some Democrats have taken exception to?
Yeah, I think it was that was certainly not right to do. She wasn't there to be part of any kind of press conference. She's there working on behalf of the state of Michigan to try to get things done. She certainly is concerned about the impact of these tariffs on the auto industry. The auto industry is critical to Michigan's economy, critical to the American economy, but especially Michigan. We're also looking at things like a new fighter mission for our Air National Guard base in Michigan. She's advocating for that. So she's certainly there, meeting with the president, advocating for Michigan and trying to have a business meeting. It's too bad that he wanted to make it a show. That's certainly unacceptable, but certainly she's doing her part to try to make things better for the people of Michigan.
Yeah, one of her spokespeople saying her presence was not an endorsement of the actions taken or statements made at that event. Senator Peters, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.